Hello and welcome back to Susanne Kurz Coaching and Media. Death and Beyond Part 7. In this video I want to add some things to the topics of near-death experiences and deathbed visions, the two topics that I have talked about in the previous videos. And I want to add a couple of things that I might not have mentioned or not have emphasized enough. So let's start with near-death experiences. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that people who experience a near-death experience sometimes meet dead relatives during this experience. And that's the interesting part. Sometimes they meet dead relatives they don't even know. And there are various configurations at work here. Sometimes this dead relative tells them who they are and gives them a message for another family member. And sometimes I think they don't even tell them who they are, but give them a message for another family member. And sometimes they just get to know the person during this experience. And that can be a great grandparent, it can be an early deceased grandparent or a great uncle or aunt or whatever. And I think in one case I even read about an elder sibling who was a stillborn child and then wasn't talked about. So the person didn't know they had an older sibling who was stillborn. So sometimes that happens, and then after the person wakes up after the near-death experience and remembers the message they had to give to the other family member and tells them about this message, then they hear from this family member who this person was, or they get a confirmation about who this person was. Sometimes the message also has a content that the person who has the near-death experience has no idea about and doesn't know and doesn't even know what it means. But the other person, the family member that gets this message, very well knows what it's about and totally makes the connections. And it also has happened that the person who had the near-death experience then afterwards saw a family photo of the person they had met for the first time in the near-death experience, during the near-death experience, and then asks others about who that is, and they tell them, and so they understand who they have met there. This would mean that new information actually comes in. The person who has the near-death experience gathers new information during the near-death experience. And that shouldn't be possible if the consciousness is bound to the physical brain and produced by it, because then in a situation of a near-death experience, there are only two types of things that should be available in this consciousness. One, things that have been in the consciousness before, like memories, and two, things that are currently happening around the person or inside the person while they are having the near-death experience, and they are somehow conscious of that, and that enters their consciousness. So these two types of things could be available during this experience, but new information from the outside couldn't come in, essentially. So that would be a really interesting case in point for making the point that consciousness is not created by the physical brain. Of course, there, as usual, is a little bit of a problem here, because we can't be sure if the person who has the near-death experience has not sometime in their life seen a photo of this dead relative or heard something said about this dead relative and has some memory that they are just not conscious of, which they can't access consciously, but it's there, and during the near-death experience it then comes up. So that is theoretically possible. Now, to clarify for ourselves if we find this potential explanation plausible, we would need to take a couple of cases, put them side by side, and look at them, how plausible we think this explanation is. And it also depends on the content of the message, for example, and if the person could have known what the message contains, even on a, subconscious level. Obviously, as mostly with this topic, it's not really secure and clear how to evaluate it. But now let's look at the deathbed visions, because there's also a very interesting phenomenon, and that is that a person who is on their deathbed and is dying slowly, and they have a deathbed vision of some kind of a different dimension and some people coming to them, for them, to take them with them. And by the way, a deathbed vision is a very profound experience often. People who have been in excruciating pain before, had a depression and things like that, had a complete switch of mood and were delighted and happy and in a great mood afterwards. So that can really make a deep impression. But okay, let's say they now perceive some kind of beings that come to them, and sometimes that's dead relatives. And now the situation is that people who are conscious and having this kind of visions on their deathbed can also interact with their physical environment and the people who are physically present in that room at the same time. So now what has happened is that they've seen a relative there and were surprised by that because they thought this person is alive still. And they communicated their experience to the other people who were physically present. And then it turned out that this person had just passed away the same day or even the same hour. And the dying person didn't know about that, but saw them because they came to take them with them. And that would be new information coming to the person who has kind of a widened consciousness for this different dimension and sees the just recently deceased person there and didn't even know that they were dead. Now, obviously, the value of this kind of proof, so to speak, depends on the question whether in deathbed visions people always encounter dead people, or if they could also encounter people who are still alive. But even in that case, I would have to look that up. I'm not quite sure. I think it's mostly dead people, dead relatives, and other beings. Don't know if there's a case when it was someone who was still alive. But even in that case, it's just a very, surprising coincidence then that this person has just passed away recently and the dying person didn't know about that. And so specifically then. Now, that's for today. I hope you found that interesting. I find that really fascinating, even if it's not, about really proven truth or anything. And in the next videos, I want to talk about other phenomena, which also beg the question if our consciousness is actually produced by our physical brains or not. What is more plausible? And we will also get to know models of explanation for, how it could work if we were to accept that our consciousness is not produced by the brain. So then we can see which model is more, more powerful to explain things. I hope you'll come around again, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Have a good time until then, and bye for now.